Vanguard!
Dragonic Vanquisher is known as a powerful, yet calm and collected general of Narukami, but during the last civil war of Krei, he was pushed to his breaking point. When Vanquisher lost his comrades during an ambush orchestrated by Shiranui, he lost himself in a fit of rage, which awoke something within the dragon himself. He achieved a new form which he can tap into for a brief moment before reverting back to his calm old self. Now he's training to achieve full control over this new power so he can protect his future allies. This new form, giving the name FULLBRONTO. Dragonic Vanquisher FULLBRONTO is the latest form of Vanquisher, which allows him to lose his calm and concentrated state to enter a state of rage and aggression, which allows him to strike twice for the sake of losing consistent power output. This is seen through his many different abilities. FULLBRONTO possesses a passive ability which allows him to be treated as the same unit as the old Dragonic Vanquisher. They are aimer one and the same. This allows FULLBRONTO to still get access to powerful Vanquisher support cards like Dragonic Dragoon. FULLBRONTO's second ability allows him to empower the front row with 10k power the moment he enters the field as a new Vanguard. This is somewhat similar to the old Vanquisher that has a passive 10k output, only FULLBRONTO is more aggressive as it comes out the moment he enters the field. This all has to do with FULLBRONTO's third ability, as whenever FULLBRONTO gets bound from hand while your current Vanguard is Dragonic Vanquisher, you can discard a card to superior right FULLBRONTO from the bind zone. This gives you access to a second Vanguard swing while also generating more Axle Circles mid-battle. And at the end of the turn, you can write a new grade 3 from Soul as rest. However, during that ride, you don't generate another Axle Circle. FULLBRONTO allows you to multi-attack with the Vanguard while at the same time empower your field as you grant the entire front row an additional 10k power buff, including himself. This in itself shows us a powerful new Vanguard unit, but FULLBRONTO is a piece to a very powerful Narukami puzzle. So let's look at the other pieces to truly understand what's really happening here. And the best place to begin our search is with the previous Dragonic Vanquisher. This is the true main grade 3 of the deck, as he allows us to empower the front row with a passive 10k power. To enable that, we can use its other skill, which allows us to bind one front row rearguard and one card from both players' hands. This gives us hand destruction while also setting up for our plays, as we can bind a card that recalls itself back so we don't lose on card advantage. The idea is to use this Vanquisher to empower our attacks and remove cards from opponent's hand, and then mid-battle, once we're almost done with our attacks, we bind FULLBRONTO to get a second Vanguard attack. This gives as many units as possible the 10k power buff, either from Vanquisher or from FULLBRONTO. And once we're done, we rewrite back into Vanquisher, so next turn we have the grade 3 in Soul for the full hand destruction effect without needing to rewrite another Dragonic Vanquisher. Another very powerful grade 3 supporter is Dragonic Dragoon. This card allows us to fill the Soul, draw more cards, while opening up the field for more superior calls. Speaking of which, he even allows us to bind our own cards, so he is an extender for our multi-attacks while also binding our opponent's units. Dragonic literally does everything we could wish for. And Dragonic isn't the only one, as we also have Rockclimb Dragoon. This grade 2 is almost as good as Dragonic, as he does the same things. The only difference is that he draws only one card instead of potentially two, and he doesn't generate Soul. But what he does do better is remove himself from the field before binding cards from hand, so you can use him on an Axle Circle and then superior call the bound card to the same circle to get more value out of your cards. I talked about multi-tags, while so far I only mentioned cards that bound your own cards, but that has to do with the following cards themselves. Demonic Dragon Berserker Chatara is our main multi-attacker target. He can be a solid 33k beater on an Axle 2 marker with a 10k buff while also possessing a solid on-hit effect. So binding him with a Dragonic or a Rockclimb Dragoon will enable you to achieve strong multi-attacks. But he isn't the only one, as we also have Chain Bolt Dragoon. This card allows us to search for either of our Vanquisher cards, which is really good, but more importantly, He, just like Chatra, can recall himself to the battlefield once bound from hand, so he also enables our multi-tech options. Chainbolt Dragoon and Chatra aren't the only multi-tech options for Narukami, as Vanquisher also has access to Rising Phoenix. This card can synergize with Vanquisher, Jaggy Shot and Rockclimb Dragoon to get even more attacks during the battle phase, or in Vanquisher's case, set up a field during the main phase. So as you might have noticed, the core cards of Vanquisher doesn't really use resources. Yes, Vanquisher uses a counterblast and Chatra has a soul blast cost on and on hit, while at the same time Jaggy Shot and FULLBRONTO generates even more soul. This results in Vanquisher being a very powerful engine that doesn't run out of steam quickly. Their speed is determined on how many engine pieces they draw, and with the many draw and cycle skills within the engine itself, means it's most likely they will always be at full power or close to at their full power. Dragonic Vanquisher excels in multi-attacks by chaining self-binders into recalls over and over again. This means you won't have a static board, so even though it's very likely you can fill the front row, it's not that beneficial to run fronts. But seeing as you have 2 Vanguard swings, you can time your Vanguard attacks in such a manner that all your units can benefit from those front triggers. But this requires quite a setup and also a lot of luck. Of course, crits are a great safe bet, as not only will both Vanguard attacks swing with potential crit pressure, you can put weight behind your strong attacks. And you can also combine it with Chatra's on hit effect to force more value. In terms of Excel markers, it's an easy Excel 2 decision. This allows you to generate card advantage while multi-attacking, as you can go +1 on FULLBRONTO's rewrite instead of going net 0. And with all the passive power increases to the board, thanks to both Vanquisher, means that that extra 5k won't really matter in most circumstances. Now, before we dive into the different builds, let me explain the unique Vanquisher playstyle with all the self-binders and bind targets, as well as the different multi-attackers. So in Vanquisher, we have 4 types of cards. We have self-binders. These cards allows us to bind our own card from hand to gain some kind of advantage. They on their own are usually net 0 on card advantage. The second group are the bind targets. These cards can recall themselves back to the field when they are bound from hand. These are the prime targets for your self-binders. They allow you to turn those cards in actual pluses while also generating multi-attacks during the battle phase. The third group are the field binders. These cards allows us to bind cards from the field, which are usually our opponent's card, and they are not only used to disrupt our opponent's field, but mainly to activate the fourth group of cards, which is Rising Phoenix. He allows us to gain more multi-attacks when paired off with a mid-battle bind effect. So the idea is to chain as many self-binders with bind targets and field binders with Rising Phoenixes in the drop zone to achieve the maximum amount of attacks. And while doing that, you want as many attacks as possible to gain the 10k power buff off of your Vanquishers. In order to maximize your output, you need to be aware of some details. Rockclimb Dragoon allows you to use the same circle for both attacks, as you first open up the circle before resolving the effect of the bound card, or if you retired something, the effect of Rising Phoenix. So you can use him as an excellent Axel Circle attacker. Jaggy Shot Dragoon has sadly a bit less utility, as he binds a card from hand and binds a card from the field at the beginning of the attack, and only goes towards the soul at the end of that attack. So you can't utilize the same circle immediately with Jaggy Shot Dragoon. You can, however, use him to open up the circle and then use a Rock Climb or another Jaggy Shot to then use the circle itself. Both Jaggy Shot and Rockclimb Dragoon are excellent extenders, as they can bound one card and then potentially recall that unit. But keep in mind, they can do more than generate one extra attack, as whenever they bind a unit from the field, they can also superior call any Rising Phoenixes to the field. So one Jaggy Shot or one Rockclimb Dragoon can generate anywhere from 1 upwards to 5 extra attacks, depending on the amount of Axel Circles and the amount of Rising Phoenix in your drop zone. Speaking of Rising Phoenix, when using him correctly, we can generate a lot of extra free attacks. If we have 2 or more in the drop zone, we can use them to recall more in one turn, depending on the amount of units your opponent has, as we can use a Jaggy Shot or Rockclimb Dragoon to bind 1 to recall some Rising Phoenix to the field, then we bind another unit and we superior call new Rising Phoenixes on top of the already called ones, which reloads the drop zone again. And we can keep this up as long as our opponent has units and we have ways to bind them. But we can also recall new units on top of the Rising Phoenix mid-battle, like Chatra and Chainbolt Dragoon, to send them back to the drop zone and then recall them again later that turn. Another interesting interaction with the Rising Phoenix is with FULLBRONTO. Whenever we use a Dragonic Dragoon or Rockclimb Dragoon to bind a FULLBRONTO, we create an extra Axle Circle. Normally, it's impossible to have a unit there before we give the front row the extra 10k power. But if we have a Rising Phoenix in a drop zone and we bound a rearguard, we can actually superior call a Rising Phoenix to that new circle before we give the field the power buff, thus utilizing our resources to their max potential. And finally, we have both Vanquishers. Of course, I already stated earlier in this video, but you want to stay on the old Vanquisher as long as possible, and once you go into your last wave of attacks, or you feel the need for that extra Axle Circle to gain more advantage out of your units, then you can go into a FULLBRONTO. Now that we've discussed everything you need to know to understand how a Dragonic Vanquisher build functions, it's about time we take a look at some different builds we can make for FULLBRONTO. As we can see, we have the entire Vanquisher core with some extra additions to increase the overall consistency and potential output of the deck. One such a card is the Grade 3 Searcher, Mighty Bolt Dragoon. This is especially good for Vanquisher as our Grade 3s are incredibly powerful, and rewriting is especially strong with our multi-tags, so any of our Grade 3s are good hits for Mighty Bolt Dragoon. The other new addition is Fiendish Sword Eradicator Cho-Oh. This can be used as an early game field control option, but he's mainly here as an extra multi-attacker. Cho-Oh becomes a lot better with the introduction of FULLBRONTO, because now we can swing with the Vanguard, put all the crits on this unit, and then swing twice with the addition of those criticals, as we have a second Vanguard swing which can restand him with all those crits. So he adds another layer on top of the extra multi-attack system of Vanquisher. And as we discussed, the counterblast won't be a big issue as we hardly use it anyways, as games won't go beyond that second to third Vanquisher turns. This build used the generic Vanquisher engine with the extra multi-attack options added on top of it. But we can also go all in on the Vanquisher multi-attack strategy while also going for more field disruption. So in this list, we added Voltechshred Dragon and Vibro-Crusher Dragon to enable this new direction. Voltechshred Dragon is yet another self-binder, only this card stays on the board, so as long as our opponent doesn't interact with our field, we can generate more attacks each and every single turn. The only downside is that he doesn't enable Rising Phoenix. The second new addition is Vibro-Crusher Dragon. This card is a draw engine while also allowing us to generate more value out of our Jaggy Shot and Rockclimb Dragoon. In most scenarios, our opponent has only 2 front row units, so if we're using Vanquisher ability, they lose one of them. So that means we can only bind one unit with either Jaggy Shot or Rockclimb Dragoon, which in turn means we can only activate Rising Phoenix once that turn. To increase the bind targets, thus multi-attack options, we can rely on Vibro-Crusher Dragon, as with him we can pull a back row unit to the front row, thus giving us 2 targets to bind that turn. The overall combos won't change with this list, it just gives the deck more flexibility, as now we can increase the chance and amount of targets we can bind from the field, and we have a consistent unit that can bind cards from our hand, thus allowing us to always come out swinging with some extra attacks. Now for the final list, we're going to add some extra spice to the deck to give it some nice early game plays, as well as a powerful, very powerful late game finisher. The card that enables that is none other than Martial Arts Dragon. This card allows us to generate impactful attacks, as it helps us in the early game to overcome defensive triggers, as it easily hits an extra 10 to 20k, but it becomes even better as a finisher once our opponent is at 5 damage. Remember how easy it is to recycle those Rising Phoenixes? If we do that only one time, we can generate 4 to 6 extra free attacks on top of everything else we're doing. So we can look at the Martial Arts Dragon that can easily have 50 to 60k extra power, which comes after all the extra multi-attacks, as the more we attack, the stronger he gets. And that is a deadly concoction, as we already are whittling down their defenses. So as we can see, Vanquisher is a very deadly deck with a lot of combo potential, but there are many more options to explore, as there is another bind target we haven't discussed, which is Desert Gunner Baijin. This is seen as the weaker Chainbolt Dragoon, but if you want to go all in on the bind targets, you can include him in your list as well. Another option is Desert Gunner Gaimon. Because we're attacking with the Vanguard twice and we can achieve quite sizable numbers, there might be merit in running him in your list, especially if you're going for the Martial Arts Dragon play, so try looking at a potential synergy between those two cards. Another interesting card that could be used as a tech option is Scattering Lightning Spear Ramzi. Just like Gaimon, this card can benefit from the fact that we have 2 Vanguard swings. We can turn any unit into a Cho-Oh for the cost of an extra counterblast, but it also allows us to reuse strong on-attack skills like Dragonic Dragoon or Voltechshred Dragon. This allows us to have 2 self-binder effects while only having 1 card on the field, which could be a very interesting play. And finally, we have a Japanese promo which could be interesting, which is Dragon Dancer Barca. This grade 2 is similar to Voltechshred Dragon with some small differences. She, just like Rockclimb Dragoon, activates after she attacks, so you can use the same circle if you want to. She also moves back row units to the front row, so she fulfills a similar role like Fiber Crusher Dragon. The only potential downside is that she binds first, then draws, whereas Rockclimb Dragoon and Voltechshred Dragon draw first, which allows them to potentially draw into that bind target. All in all, she could be a really nice addition to the Vanquisher deck, but so far there hasn't been an official release date confirmed for this card, so that's still in the air. But luckily, Vanquisher is already powerful enough even without this card. Dragonic Vanquisher FULLBRONTO recharges the Vanquisher deck into the new meta, where it can compete with the new top dogs. The deck still holds true to its old playstyle and gimmicks, only now it's supercharged with even more power and more combo potential, which allows the Vanquisher to be played in many different ways and on many different levels, which is something we can't say about everyone. And that wraps up this deck spotlight. Now keep in mind, the information presented in this video is just the bare basics, so try to evolve your personal deck and experiment with other cards that the clan has access to. If you're interested in more content like this deck spotlight, then check out this playlist where we also talk about other main VR boss units from VBG12, Divine Lightning Radius, as well as all the other previous VR units from the V era itself. This video was possible thanks to our awesome Patreons over at patreon.com/VanguardInsider. You guys are amazing. If you do want to support the channel or everything that's happening on the channel, you can simply go to patreon.com/VanguardInsider and become a Patreon today. But with that said, I'm Mr. Timeleap, and I see you guys in the next one!